Welcome to another episode of Accessibility Insights. I'm Eugene Woo, the CEO of Venngage. Venngage is the only design tool in the market that exports accessible PDFs. So if you're struggling with accessible PDFs, come check us out. Right. Today, we have a very special guest. I couldn't be more excited for the conversation we're going to have with Alex Dunn, the CEO of Cephable. Cephable is transforming personal tech and helping businesses improve productivity and accessibility through its suite of AI-enabled tools. Today, we'll be diving into Alex's journey, the vision behind Cephable, and we'll get his views on how AI is reshaping the landscape of accessibility. Welcome, Alex.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Right. So my first question is the name Cephable. I'm a big fan of cephalopods. In that, obviously, to those who don't know, those are like octopuses. I don't know if that's the plural, octopi, octopuses, squids, and they're very highly intelligent creatures. And I'm guessing there's a connection. So tell us about like the name and what's the origin of Cephable.
Yeah, so the name actually has some interesting origin stories. It's gone through a few iterations. So like I started the research that led to it back in 2020, and all like the research projects had code names like Suave keys and Snap keys and stuff like that. And then when it sort of evolved into its first version of a real product, it was actually called an enabled play controller. And it was this little hardware box that we were building that allowed you to use adaptive voice controls and camera controls from your phone. And you would plug the box into your computer or to your game console, and it would act like a keyboard or a mouse or a game controller. But what sort of happened is I was building those in my basement, and when we started to sort of grow past this like just hobbyist or passion project assistive technology platform into what we start to do today, was mostly because we had inbound interest in the enterprise. And so at the time, our brand was a little octopus, and that was our
Okay.
logo, was a little octopus holding like a microphone and a keyboard and a game controller. And people loved the symbolism of what the octopus was, which is why that was sort of the original logo. Of each independent tentacle or arm has its own brain that processes on its own, but it also all comes together to make a cohesive system. Octopuses or octopi or just octopus, which by the way, all three are actual valid
Okay.
pluralizations of octopus. Um, they also have the ability to heal and self-repair independently. They're highly independent creatures. Like the symbolism was so strong, which is what led to the logo. And so when we went to go rebrand, because most of these enterprises didn't want a cute little octopus and enabled play when we're talking to like banks and big tech companies, we went through an exercise to basically find the name. And so we didn't want to lose the symbolism of the octopus or a cephalopod in general, which, if you didn't know, means head and foot because their brain is actually running through
Right.
their appendages, which is interesting. So we wanted to lean into the abilities we create. Cephalopod, able. That's how we ended up there. Probably a longer answer to
No,
just like what's up with this name kind of question.
I,
But yeah, it's a long story.
I think it's a great name, and especially if you kind of get the connection there. But your explanation, I mean, it's far beyond what I had thought. So that's great. You touched a little bit about the origin story of Cephable, like you started out with games. So I wasn't aware. Can you kind of just bring us back to that journey? What made you begin that journey into creating like accessible technology?
Yeah, so my background's mostly in product development and machine learning. So prior to starting Cephable, I was the chief product officer at a company called Voicify, doing all sorts of fun voice assistant work on the voice assistants you know and love and or hate. That's fine. To each their own. And right before the pandemic, I went home to visit my family, and I've got a younger brother with a disability. He's 15 years younger than me, so he's living at home. And basically just saw him having a hard time keeping up with some of his friends in Minecraft and Roblox
Mhm.
back at the end of 2019. And so when the pandemic hit, I had a whole lot more time on my hands. And so I started working on research on basically just ideas and ways that he would be able to communicate and control games more easily. So I also started streaming it on Twitch. All the original like projects and concepts, there's all videos of them in the past. You can watch every line of code written because I wanted to
Wow.
use it as an opportunity to teach people how to, one, write code from the very beginning, kind of demystifying some of the machine learning stuff, and also help people understand like how to go from like an idea to really building something. And it felt like a nice sort of balance of both of those. So I started working on new forms of speech recognition that could adapt to your speech over time. And then I started using that original research to compete in hackathons. So competed in one in global hackathons from Microsoft and from Snapchat, which was actually the very first version of our face and camera controls, which is to this day the hackiest thing I've ever built, which required you to install a mobile app that would launch Snapchat with a custom lens that would track your face expression changes and hand signals and stuff like that, which would just flash QR codes on the screen. Then you'd plug your phone into your computer along with the original Enable Play controller, and then run another desktop app that would watch your phone screen, check for those QR codes, and then send a command to the controller to do something wild and ridiculous and
Wow.
not actually reasonable for a real person. But at the end of it, like you could raise your eyebrows and you could jump in a game and like you could do different hand signs and it would do cool stuff. And so that eventually evolved into like the real production enable play controllers, which then evolved into Cephable now, which is all software focused on providing alternative inputs, AI automation on top of it. It's sort of just this marriage of the new wave of machine learning and artificial intelligence with really like just focused user experiences and optimization for folks with disabilities. So yeah, that's the origin story. It's a whole bunch
Okay.
of hackathons. Even the hackathon winnings originally bootstrapped the company, which was pretty cool. So yeah, no longer streaming on Twitch, unfortunately, because there's just not enough time in the day to do it. But maybe someday I'll get back to building out some of that fun stuff.
Yeah, you should definitely. I mean, I wish I documented my early journey. It's like it's gone forever.
Yeah.
Because I would like to show, like, you can show like the before and the after, how you've seen like amazing stories. And I've seen several examples of entrepreneurs like sleeping on a sofa and whatever in their friend's bedroom, and the before and the after. It's always great
Yeah.
to have that contrast if you had documented it.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you about Cephable now. You mentioned it's mainly software now. Is
Yeah.
there no longer a hardware component? Can you just describe how would someone use Cephable? What are I guess, the use cases of the problems it solves?
Yeah, yeah. So it's all software now. Definitely, you don't need to buy any new
Okay.
hardware. If you have a laptop, you can install it. So we sort of have like two or three main offerings. We have the personal version of Cephable, which is 100% free. You can download it, you make an account for free. You can ask Cephable's AI to create controls for you for the different apps you're using. So you could go in and say things like, I want to watch YouTube, and when I lean back, I want it to pause the video, and when I lean forward, I want it to unpause, or I need voice controls for PowerPoint or my code editor or something like that, and it
Right.
scaffolds it for you. The goal with that is to build up our community and user base while also disrupting what we consider to be a pretty high disability tax when it comes to accessing technology, where traditionally, if I buy a laptop and I'm an individual with a disability, I usually have to go procure other assistive technologies in
Right.
order to use it to its fullest, which are usually expensive or there's a bunch of custom hardware and stuff. So we wanted to not only build like the best solution, but we wanted to disrupt that space too. So it's totally free for individuals. Then we have professional offerings for businesses to use with their employee base as a way to create more accessible, more productive, more ergonomic environments for employees. And we also have SDKs and APIs that can be integrated into other apps so that businesses can make their apps more accessible, their games, their devices, et cetera,
Okay.
while also reaching and supporting a larger audience of people with disabilities. So ultimately, we're bringing our community to the apps and devices and games that are more
Okay.
accessible to them and helping businesses, basically reach new customers. Um, so yeah, that's in terms of the sort of focus areas though within accessibility. I mean, we're rooted in essentially what we say is anyone who has a hard time with a keyboard and mouse, and that kind of implies a lot of different things. It could be that you have an upper mobility impairment that makes like, your dexterity in your hands have challenges. It could be a temporary disability like you broke an arm or a wrist. It could be that you're at risk for like a repeated strain injury like carpal tunnel syndrome and you need to offset
Right.
some of it. Or it could just be that you want to use your voice because it's faster than like memorizing all of these different keyboard shortcuts and stuff like that to have an accessible and productive experience. But we have in terms of like the community of folks with disabilities, we've got folks in that entire spectrum. We have folks that are blind, low vision, deaf, hard hearing, upper
Okay.
mobility impairments, folks without impairments at all, intellectual developmental disabilities that all get some sort of benefit out of the platform. And the way we sort of are able to encapsulate all of that is by allowing an individual to personalize their controls you don't have to use everything in the platform, but find the right things that work for you that make your life better or more productive or just more fun, and basically
Right.
bring those to all those different apps. So that's our approach. Lots of fun stuff we
Okay.
get to do within that too.
Very cool. So let me ask you. I'm trying to simplify like the offering to to everyone. So I'm going to give you an example, and if you can tell me like that's possible with Cephable or not. So
Yeah.
let's say I cannot use the keyboard just because for whatever reason, um, and I download your software and I want to be able to use the scroll bar. When I'm reading, I want it to scroll down.
Yeah.
Would I be able to use the like my camera and your software to then train the control, I guess, to
Yeah.
instead of scrolling, pushing the down button, train it to just scroll using what would I use? Would I use like a train it to use like let's say I don't know like a blink or something like that?
Yeah, yeah. So one absolutely great use case. You could do things like tilting your head forward, so like looking a
Okay.
little bit lower towards the ground to start scrolling
Okay.
down. When you stop looking down, it stops. That's a really common one. What's
Okay.
cool about like with camera control, so there's face expressions, eyebrow raising, mouth opening, smiling, things like that.
Right.
Then there's head movement, tilting, turning, leaning, and all of those different sort of 3D directions. And then there's also voice, which you can apply to just about anything. And so if you have the ability to move your actual neck and head, using head movements is really common for our users.
Okay.
But what's cool is you can actually change the sensitivity of it too. So let's say you wanted to tilt your head down in order to actually start scrolling down, but you can't tilt your head all the way down because you have some limited mobility or something like that. Well, you can change the sensitivity so that it's like all the way to like a tiny twitch movement. So like if your
Okay.
head moves less than like half a degree forward, it can start to scroll down, and then when you come
That's
back up, it'll stop. And you can change that for like any specific movement if you want to, just to make it just personalized for you.
okay. Well, that's really cool. So
Yeah.
yeah. And do you find for people who download for people who are using Shufflable now, are they using it to play games? Are they using it for work? What's getting a lot of traction?
Oh, it's everything. I think, we because we started in gaming, like a lot of our early community is still very much in that space. And also a lot of people use it for work. We'll use it for playing games too, and vice versa. Sort of like what we usually see is people come to the platform for like one specific goal. They're like, I saw a video of someone using Cephable and I want that one thing. And then they kind of start to realize all the things they can do with it. Most of our users are like corporate employed individuals that are using it at work. So that's like any type of role. We've got developers that use it, like marketing, legal folks. But I think some of the most interesting cases that we've seen come up in terms of like usage we didn't expect was one, people using it as an ergonomic tool. When we build specifically as an assistive technology,
Mhm.
we didn't expect to see a high uptick in people that don't have a current mobility impairment but are trying to avoid it at work with like using less mouse movement, less keyboard
Right.
movement, and not having to
Okay.
memorize keyboard shortcuts as much. But my favorite, honestly, is this woman named Hogan. She actually just passed the bar exam using Cephable for all of her
Wow.
voice
Okay.
control. So all the dictation, all the voice inputs. And the reason she's able to use it in the bar exam is because it all runs offline. So like the speech recognition runs on her device, which made the bar exam practitioners or proctors, I should say, very happy because it made the security
Yeah.
process for making
All
sure
right.
she's not using it to cheat, very easy to follow. So that I think was one of the coolest ones, and one that I get to proudly tout on Hogan's behalf that she was able to pass the bar exam and become an attorney using Cephable to take the exam.
Oh, so your technology runs like natively on the device. You're not making cloud calls to, let's say, OpenAI or something to
Right.
do the voice to do the voice to do voice recognition or anything else you're doing.
Yeah.
So you've built all this technology yourself.
Right. Yeah. So the speech recognition runs offline. Your voice is never
Okay.
recorded or streamed off your device. The camera
Okay.
controls run entirely offline. Your face is never recorded or streamed off your device. Even when we integrate, right? So even like if you take our web SDKs and you add camera and voice controls to your own web app, that's still actually running all within the browser. So the models are so squeezed down and optimized to perform on
Okay.
lower end devices that we basically can run it anywhere. I mean, the original like enable play controllers that ran it were running on Raspberry Pi. So like we can run our voice
Wow.
controls
Okay.
on like the old Raspberry Pi 4s and run the camera controls there too. The places where you do want to have an internet connection is if you have multiple devices. So you can, for example, use the Cephable mobile app on iOS and Android. And if you wanted to use your phone's camera to do stuff on your PC, then both of them need to be connected to the internet. Or a really common use case is people will set up virtual buttons on the phone or on a tablet
Okay.
that they can tap more easily to do stuff. So in that case, if you're using multiple devices, they need to be connected. And then everything else is like syncing your settings across devices and stuff like that that needs to
Okay.
be connected to the internet. But none of the core use is actually
Okay.
leaving your device at all.
Okay. Well, I'm going to ask you a business question because I'm an entrepreneur as
Yeah.
well. And a lot of times we develop like great products. It's really hard to get it distributed or even to get people to know about your products. And yeah, so what have you done to sort of, market your own product? And what would your advice be to other entrepreneurs in the accessibility space or assistive technology space? How so just like you, I go to these conferences, I'll see these great products, and I'm like, but they don't really go outside of the conferences. If you're not part of the
Yeah.
community, no one actually knows about them.
Yeah.
And it is kind of a problem, I think. Yeah. So yeah, what is your take on that?
Yeah, so I'll sort of share it more in like how it's evolved over time because like, I'm a product guy myself and I'm not a marketing person or salesperson, although I'm very quickly becoming one. And also have to give credit to our amazing folks on the team that are spearheading a lot of that work. But for me, what I found first and foremost when it comes to anything accessibility or assistive technology is you have to show it. You have to show real users using it in their everyday use so that people can relate to what it is. So even when we started going from these enabled play controllers into what Cephable is now, I mentioned briefly, like a big reason for that was because we had inbounds from large corporations basically saying like, I saw a video of someone using your tech and it seems like it's a solution to a problem that we're facing with accessibility in our products or in our video game.
Right.
What can we do from here? And so initially it was a lot of inbound from people just seeing videos and getting it shared, a lot of
Mhm.
user generated content that goes a long way. Now, the challenge in the accessibility space is getting high quality user generated content is not always easy because there isn't like a bunch of studios out there that are just like,
Right.
yeah, we've got, a bunch of talent of folks with disabilities that are eager to showcase your stuff. There's a handful of them that are doing great work, but for the most part, we started with just like whatever content you can give us that you want to share of using Cephable, just do it, and we'll help you like then turn that into something if you want to. So a lot of video content. We still lean on video content all the time. And then the rest of it is when it comes to expanding beyond the sort of accessibility community bubble, especially in the enterprise, has been on making accessibility fun and cool and interesting and stepping past like a compliance requirement. Because
Okay.
from experience and talking to folks like developers and like HRIT folks on the employment side, a lot of times people have a gut reaction of like, it's another thing I have to do. I already have this really
Yep.
long backlog, and now I've got people yelling at me because we're going to get sued. And now when it comes from like the community side, like let's not stop doing that because you need to put pressure on people to get stuff done.
Mhm.
But what we found so far is you can make it more engaging and exciting, and you can get on a roadmap faster or get implemented faster when you make it cool. When we actually show, hey, for example, in a video game, like I've got a user who played your game on PC with Cephable controls, and like here's what that looks like. Now you can sort of imagine where that expands past this one individual into all these other experiences where you have someone playing your game with just their voice and face that you like individuals never would have sort of fathomed before. And then from there, it's giving it to them to try to actually, try building some of these things out and experiencing it for themselves. For us, it's nice that we have a free version that is just like, hey, if you want to try it, like go ahead and sort of see what it feels like to experience your app through the lens of new inputs. Um, so it's been a lot of showcasing that, and then it's the biggest challenge has been validation because being a startup at all, whether in the accessibility space and especially selling to enterprises like we do, enterprises don't like to be the first one to make a move and
Mhm.
to do
Yep.
to implement a new technology. And individuals within those companies don't want to risk their jobs on like bringing in tech that's not vetted by the market. And so a lot of our initial effort in like the first year since we launched was focused on finding who are those really, really early adopters who are willing to do anything and talk about it in the market, to then be able to get some
Okay.
validation. And from there, it's grown a lot. So for us, it was working with folks at Microsoft and Intel and Accenture that were
Okay.
interested in doing smaller scoped projects, showcasing the value, but they were willing to talk about the tech back the tech, share videos, and share testimonials behind it, which then grew into us working more with Microsoft, which then turned into working with the Qualcomm team on the new Copilot Plus PC launches, to now working with all the different PC manufacturers that, we're exploring all sorts of things, including having our stuff available out of the box so that it's making their devices more accessible from the very beginning and not putting the burden on an individual to go find their own assistive tech. Um, so yeah, it's a whole bunch of stuff. But we start with just like you got to show it, because otherwise people don't necessarily believe
Okay.
it, especially when we're claiming some sort of like, yeah, we're doing AI stuff in accessibility, which immediately throws all sorts of different red flags for people. But it's like, no, here's what it really means. It's personal and it's accessible and it's private, and like here's why it matters, and here's everybody who's showing how great it is for them.
Yeah, I mean everybody says claims they use AI right now, and you're right. Like to certain people, that's a red flag. But it's also like overly used in
A
everything
hundred
now.
percent.
And so it's kind of hard to tell. Is that just marketing speak,
Yeah.
or not? I do. I really the whole point that on the point you made on making it fun and interesting. I think that's. I mean, you found a way to do that really well, which is awesome. Which I think for everyone else in the accessibility product space, it's a big challenge. I think like you said, the perception is always like accessibility is yet another thing I have to learn. I have to change my workflow, my process now. And it's usually a compliance issue, right? It's usually
Right.
I got to do it if not I'll get sued, or there's a government ADA Title II. And for us, a lot of times we go into that discussion. It's all about compliance. Um, Let me ask you about video. Like, so you mentioned, streaming and Twitch and all of that. Are you still fairly active, you as in you and your company, fairly active on social media? Are you making, UCG, user generated content, or making the content yourself and putting it on social media so that, people can see it and then like download Cephable,
Yeah.
like kind of use it themselves?
Yeah, constantly.
Okay.
From like our tutorial videos and just showing people how to do stuff to very selected, like larger, or I should say higher quality user generated content, and like supporting actually like we'll go to the user and do an interview with them to talk about like
Okay.
their overall experience, not just with Cephable, but with technology, and then
Right.
finding where Cephable is and what it does for them. Like sharing user stories is become extremely impactful, because even if you're an individual that doesn't have lived experience or you don't have family experience, but like you're in the workplace and you're hearing a story from someone that like is sharing the challenges they face in doing their job and like just having the chance to do their job and participate in the team, to then say like, oh, these are the tools that are unlocking those experiences for people. It's hard to not, get
Okay.
interested in it and to want to try it out. So yeah, tons of content there. We've got a great newsletter as well that doesn't just share, things like user stories, but also industry insights in the accessibility space for developers, for employers, for individuals in navigating the assistive tech space too. But yeah, we're pretty active on LinkedIn, on Twitter slash
Okay.
X, on Instagram, even, where we share a lot of the stories and video content. And then on YouTube too, which is like YouTube's like our source for like tutorials and use case videos
Okay.
and everything else. But yeah,
Okay.
still constantly. We've got a great team. I got to shout out Alexa Orban, who's our director of marketing and communications, because she really elevated what we were doing. And especially going from like when Enable Play was kind of new and people that kind of knew what it was, we had some cool articles written about it, to like rebranding and shifting and getting people to know what Cephable really is. I got to give credit to her and to our COO Jason Fields too, because they definitely are the ones that made it happen.
Okay, cool. I want to ask about, you mentioned the early adopters and working with Microsoft, and being part of the Microsoft Copilot PC launch. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, is your product, is Cephable kind of integrated into either Copilot or in the operating system now, or is that the vision?
It's not yet, but that's definitely where we're trying to head. Whether that's with Microsoft or with like specific PC builders first, we should
Okay.
be able to see more Cephable availability out of the box over the next year. Those types of things take just a very long time
Yeah.
to be brought to life. But yeah, I mean, we've been working with Microsoft. Actually, I mean, I've been a Microsoft MVP just in my personal development career for like 9 years or something now.
Wow. Okay.
And then when even in the early hackathon days where I won their Azure AI and then their Azure accessibility hackathons, That sort of got me closer to being embedded with their research teams at the Inclusive Tech Lab within Microsoft Research and with their product accessibility team. So like we've had very close communications and they've been very supportive of the growth of Cephable so far. But now we're sort of at this point where we're doing a lot of other cool stuff together. Some things I can't announce yet, but some
Okay.
things that are definitely
Okay.
definitely going to change the shape of what accessibility means when it comes to computing.
Okay. How about with game publishers? Is there anything you can share? Any big publishers you can share
Oh,
that is actually integrating some of the
yeah,
some
so
of the yeah.
there's one I can share. We did a cool public demo, which is Unleashed Games,
Okay.
building a game called Haven, which is a sort of a multiplayer fantasy RPG game where you got the classic sort of classes and specs and stuff like that. But it's really cool because you can do things like set up voice commands for casting spells. So like as the old meme goes of saying like fireball, fireball, lightning bolt, those actually work now, which is interesting. Like you can actually
Okay.
sort of be like LARPing in
Okay.
your room while playing these games. But we have some really interesting larger AAA titles that are launching with Cephable later this year as well as early
Okay.
next year. Those we can't share yet, and the reason I laughed right away is like the timing is so interesting with those. So when it comes to the gaming space, like, getting embedded into a game usually requires that you start working with those folks like years ahead of the production of it or
Okay.
the publishing of it,
Okay.
I should say,
All right.
because the product roadmaps for these games are years long and they kind of like some of them have some flexibility in these larger titles, but a lot of them get pretty locked down. So a lot of the stuff that we're doing now with our studio partners and our publisher partners and customers that are using Cephable are for games that are going to come out in like 2 to 3 years.
Oh wow.
Because we
Okay.
got in early and they're doing it the accessibility right from the beginning. And then some of these other ones that are coming out soon, we have been working with for, a year and a half to 2 years now. Before we were even Cephable, we were starting to do some work with
Okay.
them. So that, yeah, that's the hard part when it comes to the game stuff. It takes forever on these larger titles, but we're also working on ways to make it easier for indie devs to add it too, because, adding integrations to games is always complex. So we're trying to make that process easier for folks that are using like Unity or Unreal Engine
Mhm.
and just want to add a level of accessibility beyond what they should be doing out of the box with like key remapping, color contrasting, screen reader support, etc. And trying to make it easier for smaller games to sort of lean into it as well. But so far, most of our focus has been on these larger titles,
Right.
where we're going to be able to sort of break into a whole bunch of larger audiences
Okay.
too.
Do you see demand from the smaller gaming studios and like indie or like indie game makers for Cephable or something similar assistive tech like that?
There is, I would say there's an interesting balance in the indie game studios or even just single developers of games where they're trying to balance just how much work has to go into getting a game
Hmm.
built at all.
Yeah.
But if you make it easy enough, then their roadmaps are way more flexible and they're willing to try stuff out. But they aren't, in a position where they can spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on trying something, where a lot of times these larger studios can because they know the payout of it if it does work is so massive. Whereas indie studios are focused on like, how do I build a game that can get to thousands of daily players or
Right.
ideally more? Um, so that's where we're trying to sort of balance, like, can we just make it super easy and a no-brainer to add it? And then actually work with those indie studios and solo developers to do it. So there's just more work we have to do on our side to sort of enable
Okay.
that. But we're very close with the community. I'm part of the Game Awards Future Class 2, which is a host of both AAA folks as well as the sort of indie community that are building really inclusive games from the beginning. So we're building a lot of our feedback around some of those early adopters, even just from that community.
Wow. Cool. Very, very cool. So I guess we'll have to wait till the end of this year for all those announcements.
I
That's gonna
know.
be that's gonna be awesome. I'm
Shamelessly, follow
excited.
us on
Yeah.
social media at Cephable,
It's,
Cephable.
exactly. And follow
Figure out what games you'll be
Alex.
able to play with your voice and face.
Mhm. Yeah, I want to, kind of ask for, talk about AI and basically the future. Where do you see assistive technology, 10 years from now? And what is the role of AI? And I'm sure AI is in it as well, since you are an AI company.
Yeah.
Yeah, what is kind of your crystal ball on that?
I think when it comes to digital assistive tech, we're going to see a lot more adoption of AI, not necessarily from like assistive tech makers because the cost to implement things that are going to really be accessible and generative is expensive. But what I think we'll start to see is the role of assistive tech being merged more into technology that's out of the box. So whether that's it's just already there on software and you don't need to go procure it,
Right.
Cephable or not, like better screen readers being out of the box on Windows and Mac devices or on these new interfaces, which I think is where realistically things are going to go even beyond just AI. It's going to be the new ways that we communicate and interface through devices. What that exactly is, I don't know yet. But we've seen the growth of adoption from like desktop PCs to laptop to mobile devices to early-ish adoption in like the VR MR space, but a growing adoption in that space too. And it's more just multimodal, multi-device, like contextually the right device and right interface. I think that's where assistive technology is going to go. I think assistive technology and AI have a place to shape what that looks like too. The same way that the touch capacitive screen was originally an assistive tech device that turned into mobile smartphones, from the very first one being acquired by Apple, but was built by an engineer dad trying to build an interface for his child with a disability. So I think that there's a place to shape the way that humans interact with technology in assistive tech that has broader reach beyond it so that it is more ubiquitous and it doesn't have to be this whole thing where I got to go through, Medicare and my insurance to like
Right.
try to get coverage for some, super expensive piece of hardware or software. It should just be that I purchased the device and it works for me no matter who I am.
Right. Wow. I actually didn't know that anecdote about the touch screens. I was not aware. Yeah, I have to go
Yeah.
look that up.
Yeah, yeah. There's a ton of great assistive tech that's turned into like that more ubiquitous thing. I mean, like my
Yeah.
favorite example is just closed captions. Like
Yeah.
closed captions were
Yeah.
created for the deaf and hard of hearing
Hmm.
community and were forced to be implemented in America through the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. But Netflix put out their study that showed that around it was like 60 to 70% of millennials and Gen Z that are
Hmm.
not deaf or hard of hearing watch Netflix
Right.
with closed captions on. It's like it benefits everyone, whether you're at a noisy bar and you need to read something from the screen as it's happening, or you just prefer to have that extra context while you're watching. Um, to touch screens to even SMS texting was originally created as an assistive technology when we were just looking at phones in general and everything was audio. So a lot of cool stuff that people interact with every day that started from research or devices or apps
Okay.
that were assistive.
Cool. All right. I've got one last question. What advice would you give to tech companies that are just starting out in the whole accessibility or assistive tech space?
Oh man. Okay, my biggest piece of advice, because it's what's worked for me, is find a mentor in the space and make sure that you're building with the community. There has been more than a handful of companies that all had the right intentions, but they weren't
Mhm.
building with people with disabilities from the beginning. And so by the time they ship things, they're not actually being adopted by the community, and it leaves a really bad taste in everyone's mouth. So if you're not an individual with lived experience that's trying to solve your own independent problems, or you're not someone with familiar or very close relationships with the lived experiences, you're not trying to solve a person's problem you talk to every day, find people in the community to work with, at every step of the process. And then find a mentor in the space too. For me, it was Larry Goldberg, who's the ex-chief accessibility officer at Verizon and Yahoo, who, sort of helped me go from machine learning product development and voice assistance to applying that in the assistive tech space, getting connected with the right people,
Okay.
bringing me to conferences like M-Enabling, and things like that too. So those are my two biggest pieces of advice. You got to build with your community and you got to find people
Okay.
that'll help you out too.
So my follow-up question is, how did you find, or how do you find like your mentor, and how, what's your advice to people who need to find a mentor?
I literally went on LinkedIn. I'm in Boston. I literally went on LinkedIn and said Boston accessibility people. And
Oh,
I just
wow. Okay.
found a list of like 10 folks and I just started
Yeah.
sending cold messages being like,
Okay.
here's the thing I'm thinking of and working on. Here's how I've done it.
Yeah.
I need help navigating this space. Like,
Okay.
are you in a position to help me? So yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But
Shameless
that's,
cold
yeah.
outreach.
And it works. I think
Yep.
most entrepreneurs, have been in the same spot. I've done my fair share of LinkedIn and email cold outreach. It works. Like you kind of have to have your little thick skin and
Yep.
ask and shock. I guess maybe not shockingly, people do respond if you have
Yeah.
something valuable to share, right?
A
So
100%. I think especially in the accessibility space and in the disability community, like we are still striving for solutions. So like if you've got an idea for a solution, people are gonna want to try to help you see it through. So definitely. But yeah, you're gonna be humbled for sure with any sort of cold
yeah,
outreach.
yeah, 100%. Yeah. All right. I think that's all the time we have. It's been a pleasure talking with you, Alex. Just, we'll leave all your contact information and Cephable's, all their social media links on the podcast. But thanks again. This has been a great call.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much for having me.